Authorities are bracing for more violence at government headquarters after clashes that broke out last night continue this morning between police and protesters at Tamar.
Police arrested 40 demonstrators and at least 17 officers were injured during repeated attempts to keep them off the main road outside the chief executive's office.
While student leaders vowed to continue their campaign, Leung Chun-ying warned them not to mistake tolerance for weakness. Scores of police officers charged down Long Wall Road outside the government's Tamar headquarters at around 7 this morning to disperse pro-democracy protesters who had occupied it during a night of chaos. Police hosed demonstrators with cold water for the first time. When water didn't work, they went back to their batons and pepper spray. Police continued to force protesters off the road and push them towards Tamar Park, leading to more chaotic scenes. Many were subdued and arrested. The crowd eventually reached the Tamar footbridge above Harcourt Road and Connaught Road Central, the main protest base. The area became crammed with protesters refusing to budge. This led to another round of clashes. Frontline reporters were not spared by police. Protesters eventually retreated to Harcourt Road. There was another flare-up when some angry demonstrators allegedly hurled objects towards officers stationed inside Admiralty Centre. Among those injured was a man believed to be an undercover officer who was knocked out cold. He and 2 others believed to be officers as well were apparently chased and attacked by protesters before they were rescued by reinforcements. While the government called them violent radicals, the protesters insisted they were only responding to police officers going out of control with their batons. Federation of Students leader Alex Chow, who made the call for demonstrators to besiege the government compound last night, turned up in a bid to calm down emotional demonstrators. He later spoke on the main stage in the so-called Umbrella Square, dismissing claims that he was not at the front line when the rally turned violent. Chow apologized to those who were injured, admitting that his strategy to take over Long Wall Road in the bid to surround the government compound had not worked.
We could, of course, say that we have done it for a short time of period, but ultimately, well, the occupiers, they are eliminated by the police to other spots. So we would say, well, the plan, it requires, and it has lots of room to improve, and it is, in a sense, it fails at last.
But the student leader claims some success in paralyzing government operations by stopping civil servants from going to work this morning. The central government offices were forced to close all morning and could only reopen after lunch. Civil servants had difficulty returning to work because of the new blockades. LegCo meetings scheduled for today also had to be delayed. This afternoon, Chief Executive Leung Chun-ying condemned student leaders for the chaos, repeatedly warning them that public tolerance for the roadblocks and violence had reached its limit. He urged protesters to go home, stressing that his government did not want to be forced into clearing the area. Leung said he did not want to see students being arrested and getting criminal records that would harm their future academic and career prospects. But at the same time, he warned them not to mistake tolerance for weakness, stressing that police were more than capable of shutting them down. The government is refusing to say if and when it will clear the protest base on Harcourt Road and Connaught Road Central, but many demonstrators are worried it's coming soon and losing their resolve to carry on fighting. While they're complaining of a lack of a clear strategy by those heading the movement, student leaders have vowed to stay the course and urge them not to lose heart.
The High Court has granted an interim injunction to clear barricades from part of the main protest area in Admiralty.
But it looks like the court orders will not be carried out right away, as more legal procedures are pending. ATV's An Jiang reports.
Representatives of two subsidiaries of transport operator Kun Chung Bus arrived at the High Court this afternoon to learn whether their injunction bid had been successful. The two companies, one runs school buses and the other operates cross-border shuttles, wanted the court to give them permission to clear parts of the pro-democracy sit-in area on Connaught Road Central, Harcourt Road, and Cotton Tree Drive in front of government headquarters. In a written judgment, Judge Thomas Au denied the school bus operator's request for an injunction as it could only prove it lost about $4,000 because of the protests. But he granted an interim injunction to the cross-border shuttle firm as it was able to prove that its business plunged by as much as 17% between September and October. Au said the protesters had caused a public nuisance and the right to demonstrate must be balanced with people's right to use the roads. The judge, who had earlier granted the injunctions to clear the Mongkok protest site, added that bailiffs could ask for police help if necessary. The protest zone in Admiralty spans Harcourt Road and Connaught Road Central, from the PLA barracks to the police headquarters in Wan Chai. Today's injunction covers the eastbound lanes of Connaught Road Central, Harcourt Road, and parts of Cotton Tree Drive, but it doesn't cover the whole of Harcourt Road, where protesters have been camping out. It's still subject to change because the judge has asked the plaintiff to submit more information to clarify the exact areas it would like cleared. Kun Chung Chairman Matthew Wong said all supplementary information will have to be submitted by Thursday. Occupy protesters have vowed to file an appeal against the injunction. An Chang, ATV News.
Last night's clashes were some of the worst we've seen since the Occupy protests began at the end of September.
Police used plenty of force against die-hard protesters, escalating their campaign for greater democracy. ATV's Arthur Urquiola reports.
The first major confrontation erupted at around 9:30 last night as protesters swarmed onto Longhua Road in a bid to surround government headquarters at Tamar. Riot police swung batons with full force at protesters, some of whom pelted them with all kinds of objects, and glass could be heard breaking during the chaos. Police used one of the regular tactics, hosing demonstrators with a pepper spray solution. Protesters were seen being dragged to the ground and having their hands bound. Some of them wheeled out carts with bricks, but these were seized by police. Labour Party lawmaker Lee Chuk-yan was seen in the thick of action, trying to convince police and protesters to stay calm. But officers continued to lay into the demonstrators with batons, pushing them to the ground and beating them. There was more violence as they tried to stop demonstrators from taking away metal barricades. Some of them scolded officers.
Your duty is protect citizens. You're not doing this.
Dozens were injured in the clashes, and some were seen being treated for injuries by first aid teams at the site. Many complained that officers were using excessive force, as even with helmets on, protesters were bleeding from head injuries. And the more force police used, the angrier they became. The security minister laid the blame squarely on the protesters.
I just quote one or two scenes. They gathered together, put up their so-called defensive materials, and then they say 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, and then they charge the police cordon. This is systematic, with a command. Another example, they took news barriers and then form a barricade and use that to push their line forward.
Officers were initially able to keep people away from the entrance of the Longhua Road tunnel. But the demonstrators eventually forced their way onto the road, blocking traffic on the key artery from Kowloon to Hong Kong Island, running past the chief executive's office. As the crowd spilled out onto both traffic lanes, police chased them into the underpass. Protesters at the front lines fastened together metal barriers and began a new standoff with officers. The demonstrators tried to push their way through using the barriers, as well as homemade shields of wooden boards and cardboard boxes. It didn't last long as police beat them back and eventually removed the new barriers to clear the road again. But at around 3 a.m., demonstrators rushed onto the road again and started barricading it. But this time, officers didn't try to stop them right away. That occupation lasted until 7 a.m. Arthur Urquiola, ATV News.